The conductor's flashlight swept down the aisle of the nearly empty carriage. It was 2:13 a.m., and the train to Florence hummed through the valleys of northern Italy, cutting through fog so thick it blurred the world beyond the windows. On the third car, a single purse sat abandoned on the seat. Passport, phone, wallet, all zipped neatly inside. No one claimed it. No one had seen the woman who'd left it there. Her name was Amelia Voss, 31 years old, a travel photographer from Bristol. She had boarded in Milan 5 hours earlier, smiling, camera strap slung over her shoulder, bound for Tuscany to photograph a sunrise wedding. Somewhere between Bologna and Florence, she disappeared. The only clue left behind was a train ticket, stamped in blue ink by a machine that no longer existed, a stamp that shouldn't have been there at all. When investigators traced the pattern on its edge, the ink swirl, barely visible under ultraviolet, they realized it matched one used on the Italian network 20 years ago, from a station that had been demolished in 2004, a vanished passenger, an impossible timestamp, and a ticket from a station that didn't exist. The story would begin with a train no one remembered stopping, and end with a truth buried beneath the Tuscan hills for decades. Morning light in Milan felt heavy that day. It dripped down the glass of the central station's arched roof, streaked with soot and rain, turning the platforms below into reflections of themselves. Passengers moved through the haze like ghosts in coats, each destination printed in orange on the departure boards above them. And among them, weaving through the rush with a camera bag on her back and a ticket folded neatly in her hand, was Amelia Voss. She wasn't running late. She never ran late. She believed in rhythm, the kind you find in train schedules and footsteps, in the soft mechanical pulse of motion between cities. She had built her life on it. Freelance work, destination weddings, photo essays for travel magazines that wanted authentic Europe. Her editor had once called her a woman who finds order inside chaos. That morning, chaos waited for her anyway. Amelia's plan was simple. Catch the 2340 overnight train from Milan Centrale to Florence, arrive before dawn, change lines at Santa Maria Novella, then take the 0610 regional to Siena. She'd be in Tuscany by sunrise, just in time to capture the light across the old vineyards before the wedding rehearsal began. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to cover her rent for 2 months, and she liked the quiet of early travel, the world half asleep, half awake. People were honest in that hour, unguarded. At platform 14, she bought a coffee so bitter it numbed her tongue, slipped her headphones on, and started recording voice notes for her project. She was compiling sounds from every European train she'd taken that year, the metal whine, the doors closing, the rhythmic heartbeat of tracks. Her digital diary, she called it. The last entry on her recorder would end abruptly at 1:17 a.m. Before boarding, she called her sister, Lydia, back in Bristol. It was 11:36 p.m. local time. Lydia remembered the call clearly later because Amelia was laughing, really laughing the way she used to before their father died. She said, "Tell Mum I'm fine. The train's nearly empty. I'll text you from Florence." That was the last thing Lydia heard. A burst of static followed, then the train horn cutting through the signal, on board. The conductor scanned her QR code and, without explanation, stamped her printed ticket with a physical punch, something he didn't need to do. Amelia noticed it but didn't comment. She smiled politely, thanked him, and slid into her window seat. She always chose the window. She opened her camera, reviewed her shots from the day, street vendors in Navigli, a cat sleeping beneath the tram lines, an old couple dancing near Porta Venezia. Her photos were quiet, human, precise. She liked faces that told stories before the mouth ever opened. As the train pulled away, she looked out at the blurred city lights, and for a moment, her reflection and Milan's skyline fused into one, her face hovering above the tracks that led south. At Modena, the train made its first stop. A handful of passengers boarded, most heading for Bologna. One man sat 2 rows behind her, a thin figure in a gray coat, his luggage too small for a long journey. He had a scar along his cheek and a worn leather notebook that he opened without reading. She noticed him briefly, then went back to her editing. A child cried somewhere in the carriage. A woman whispered something in French. The rhythm of the rail settled into a lullaby of motion. Then around 12:50 a.m., the lights flickered once, twice, then dimmed entirely. The train slowed but did not stop. When the power returned, the conductor walked through, muttering apologies. He said they were switching to a backup line, due to construction ahead. No one thought much of it, except Amelia. She checked her phone. No service. The signal wouldn't return for another 30 minutes. Later, investigators would say this blackout was key. In that gap, something shifted, literally and digitally. The system log showed the train had taken a short detour through an unused freight connector known as Track 9B, a link not listed on any modern timetable. It bypassed a decommissioned rural station called San Pietro delle Vigne, abandoned since 2004. The same name printed faintly on her ticket stamp. But none of that mattered to Amelia then. She was watching the countryside dissolve into darkness, unaware she was crossing into a place that technically no longer existed. At 1:11 a.m., she recorded her final note. Her voice sounded tired, calm, curious, passing something strange. Old platform, lights on, no one there. Feels like time stopped. A metallic click followed. Then silence. Her phone's geolocation froze near a stretch of track with no active signal towers. When the train reached Bologna at 2:03 a.m., Amelia was gone. Her luggage remained. Her passport in the purse. Her ticket, folded, stamped, and impossibly dated April 2004. The following morning, the cleaning staff found her seat undisturbed. Coffee cup half full, camera battery drained, earbuds coiled neatly on the tray. One shoe missing. The other left beneath the seat, heel scuffed. Police initially believed she'd disembarked at one of the small rural halts between Modena and Bologna, maybe for air or a smoke. But there were no security feeds of her exit. No conductor report, no open doors logged in the system. The train never stopped between stations. And yet one passenger vanished as if she'd stepped into the fog and the fog had sealed behind her. Her disappearance made the morning news in both Italy and the UK. The story carried that romantic dread the press adored. British photographer missing in Tuscany journey. Within 24 hours, her face appeared on screens across Europe. A portrait taken from her Instagram profile. Smiling against a backdrop of vineyards. Friends described her as careful, grounded, too methodical to make reckless choices. Her last photo showed her boarding the train. Her ticket verified her seat. Everything about the record was correct except the stamp. The blue ink mark read, San Pietro delle Vigne, validated. A station erased from the map. Lydia flew to Italy 3 days later. She brought their mother's rosary and a folder of Amelia's insurance documents. Though she'd forgotten her own toothbrush, she met the investigators in Bologna, where they had assembled a small task force led by Inspector Lucia Bernardi, a veteran of the Italian state police known for solving cold cases through obsessive reconstruction. Bernardi's first words were measured. "Your sister's ticket doesn't belong to this train." Lydia frowned. "What do you mean?" "The stamp is 20 years old. The machine that made it was destroyed when the station was closed." Lydia thought it was a cruel joke. But when Bernardi showed her the ultraviolet scan, the swirl of ink looked like a fingerprint frozen in time, something both mechanical and human. Back in Milan, journalists began piecing together Amelia's travel route. They traced her ticket purchase to an online platform, confirmed her digital payment, verified the timestamp as current. The system showed no anomalies, no double bookings, no phantom stations, just a perfect transaction leading to a vanishing. What unsettled investigators wasn't what was missing, it was what appeared later. At 5:42 a.m., long after the disappearance, Amelia's train card registered another validation. Same serial number, same ID, stamped again, but this time the station name read, Florence Arrival. Except Amelia never arrived. Bernardi requested the black box data from the Trenitalia Central System. It showed every station crossing, every door open, every ticket scan, and one anomaly. Between 1 and 1:20 a.m., Track 9B recorded an unscheduled passage. 4 sensors triggered, though officially that track had been sealed off since 2004 after a derailment killed 12 workers. Since then, the area had been fenced, power rerouted, station condemned. The same San Pietro where Amelia's stamp came from. For Bernardi, it became more than a missing persons case. It was a historical contradiction, one that required both forensic precision and faith in impossible details. She sent a small team to the ruins of San Pietro della Vigna, now nothing more than concrete pillars swallowed by ivy. They found fragments of old ticket machines in the rubble, each marked with identical serial patterns. Only one had traces of recent movement. A thin layer of fresh dust disturbed around the stamp lever. Someone had used it. Recently. When Lydia visited the site, she brought Amelia's camera to the forensic lab. The last images on the memory card were corrupt except one. A blurred exposure showing a dim platform, two parallel lights, and what looked like a figure walking toward her, face obscured. The photo's metadata placed it seconds before her final voice note. The figure's shadow stretched longer than natural, as if the light itself had come from another time. Bernardi studied the evidence late into the night. The sounds, the timing, the gaps in digital signal, everything pointed to one theory she hated to admit. Amelia had entered a station that officially did not exist. And whatever happened inside those lost 20 minutes would define the next decade of her own career. She turned off the lamp, staring at the glowing train map pinned to her wall. Lines crossed, converged, diverged again. At their heart, one name pulsed faintly in blue marker, San Pietro della Vigna, and in her notebook, underlined twice, find the second ticket. The night Amelia disappeared began like any other for the railway staff assigned to the Northern Line. Cold air swept through the station arches as the last few passengers shuffled aboard the 2340 to Florence. Security footage later showed her stepping onto the platform with the easy rhythm of someone used to being alone. No hesitation. No glance backward. Just one bag slung over her shoulder. Ticket folded inside her passport. But what happened after? That, between the laughter of that phone call to her sister and the discovery of her empty seat, would unravel into one of the strangest sequences in the Italian transport archives. At 12:07 a.m., the train left Modena. The carriage lights flickered once, then stabilized. The conductor on duty, Vittorio Russo, moved down the aisles with his handheld scanner. He remembered her because she'd smiled, offered her printed ticket without being asked, and thanked him in careful Italian. When he stamped it, she'd said something like, "It's rare to see those anymore." Russo had laughed. He told her the old punch still worked even if nobody cared about it. He joked that maybe it brought good luck. That punch, the one with the obsolete blue ink, would become Exhibit A. The train rolled through darkness. Passengers dozed, phones dimmed. Outside, the countryside lay still beneath a blanket of fog so thick it looked like snow. Russo would later testify that around 12:47 a.m., a low mechanical noise echoed through the rear carriages, a shudder that wasn't on his route log. He radioed ahead, but the signal buzzed and cut out. He marked it down anyway. Brief vibration, unknown cause. That note became the last confirmed event before everything blurred. Passengers later described a moment of strange silence. No sound of wheels. No click of rails. Just the hum of electricity in the walls, as though the train had left its own track and was gliding on air. Then came the faintest change in motion, so subtle no one would have noticed unless they were awake. The train had turned imperceptibly onto a parallel line, one not meant for passengers. Amelia, according to forensic reconstruction, was awake. Her earbuds were still in, connected to her recorder. A faint audio trace recovered from the device captured the shift. Metal strain. Faint wind. A single door opening and closing. Footsteps. Then quiet. The time code 010652. The line she was on, the track 9B connector, should have been inaccessible. It branched from the main route after a freight depot, leading toward the derelict station of San Pietro della Vigna. Old maps showed the line buried under weeds, bridges rusted out, no electric signal. But the sensors didn't lie. Something had reactivated it that night. For investigators, it was the first sign of deliberate manipulation. The next evidence came from an unlikely witness. A maintenance worker named Marco De Luca, stationed at a signal post 4 kilometers from the old San Pietro junction. He reported hearing a train horn, one long, two short, around 1:10 a.m. That pattern, according to railway protocol, was a clearance request, a signal used only by freight conductors before entering a restricted track. No passenger train should have sounded it. When asked why he hadn't called it in, DeLuca said simply, "I thought I was dreaming. That horn hasn't sounded in 20 years." At 1:14 a.m., Amelia's phone pinged one last time. A single cell tower picked up her location briefly, then lost it. The coordinates placed her directly between the active line and the sealed access road to San Pietro della Vigna. The investigators cross-referenced the data with the train's GPS feed. The two didn't align. Her phone appeared stationary while the train continued moving south, meaning she wasn't on it anymore. How she left became the first great mystery. The doors were magnetically sealed during motion. There were no emergency stops. No witnesses saw her exit. And yet her belongings remained undisturbed, as if she'd stepped away for a moment and dissolved into the night. The train arrived in Bologna at 2:03. Amruso noticed her absence only when he began his final inspection. He found the purse, the coffee cup, the camera battery blinking low. He thought she'd gone to another carriage. He left the items where they were. The next morning, cleaners discovered the seat exactly as he'd left it, only now the ticket lay unfolded on the tray. The blue stamp gleamed faintly in the sunlight, and across its top edge, barely visible, someone had written 3 numbers in pencil 904. Those numbers matched an old internal ID for San Pietro's final scheduled train in April 2004, the night of the derailment. That shut the station down. 12 workers had died repairing the tracks. Their train designation, Route 904, Linea Morta, the deadline. When forensic technicians scanned the ticket under magnification, they discovered something else. A second layer of ink invisible to the naked eye. It wasn't blue. It was red, and formed a partial date. April 1804, the day the station collapsed. The investigators didn't want to believe it. Ink doesn't survive 2 decades without fading, but tests confirmed the pigment was fresh, stamped within 48 hours of the discovery. Someone or something had revalidated that ticket long after Amelia vanished. The National Rail Authority ordered a controlled investigation. Trains were rerouted. For 48 hours, the line south of Modena was closed while drones scanned the disused section of Track 9B. They found twisted metal, debris, and under a collapsed signal bridge, a modern shoe print pressed into the mud. The print matched Amelia's missing left shoe. Nearby, investigators found an object wedged in a drain pipe, a camera memory card, intact but waterlogged. It would take days before data recovery revealed what was inside. Meanwhile, police expanded the timeline backward. Hotel staff in Milan confirmed Amelia had checked out of her room at 10:15 p.m. She'd spoken briefly with the receptionist about train delays. She mentioned a man offering to help carry her bag. Security footage showed her at the station shortly after, but no man beside her. Yet in the reflection of the station window, barely caught in frame, was a faint silhouette. A tall figure with a gray coat. Investigators froze the image. It matched the man described by passengers, the one with the scar on his cheek who sat 2 rows behind her. His name surfaced later. Leonardo Esposito, a former railway engineer dismissed in 2003 after the San Pietro collapse. He'd been on duty that night, one of the few survivors. His personnel file listed chronic insomnia, post-traumatic stress, and an unresolved lawsuit against Trenitalia for negligence. He disappeared from records shortly after. Until that train to Florence. When police searched his last known address near Parma, they found nothing but boxes of railway schematics and old maintenance journals. Pinned to one wall was a large map of the northern network. Every active line was marked in black, but one was drawn in red ink, looping endlessly back on itself. At the center, San Pietro della Vigna. Underneath, handwritten in Italian, "She will see what we saw." The recovered memory card from Amelia's camera held 34 images. Most were corrupted fragments, glimpses of the carriage, flashes of faces, blurred landscapes. But 5 photos were clear. The final sequence began at 1:13 a.m. Frame 1. The view through her window. Fog-thick, faint glow of a platform ahead. Frame 2. A man's silhouette on the trackside, coat flaring in wind. Frame 3. The same man turning toward the camera, hand raised as if signaling to stop. Frame 4. A set of stairs descending into darkness, no context, no train in view. Frame 5, black. But when enhanced under light, faint letters appeared in the corner. Stamped, not printed. San Pietro della Vigna. Lydia couldn't sleep the night she saw those photos. She asked Bernardi, "Do you think she's alive?" Bernardi didn't answer. She only said, "Someone wanted her to find that station." Rail workers unearthed more unsettling evidence. Inside one of the sealed maintenance tunnels near the San Pietro junction, they found a portable ticket stamper, identical to those used 2 decades earlier. Its ink was fresh. Beside it lay a maintenance jacket labeled with Esposito's initials. Inside the pocket, an envelope addressed to AV. The note inside was short. The line never closed. It just went underground. By now, the case had consumed Italy. Newspapers printed theories daily. Ghosts, secret government tests, digital forgeries. But Bernardi saw something simpler. A system failure exploited by one man obsessed with rewriting history. She believed Esposito had lured Amelia using the same path that once led him to ruin. A revenge constructed not through violence but through reenactment. If she could prove he was alive, she could prove he'd built a hidden passage beneath the old line. 2 nights after the tunnel discovery, a freight driver on the Modena route reported an anomaly. A faint light flickering beneath the derelict bridge, followed by the sound of machinery turning. When the area was searched at dawn, they found nothing, only disturbed soil and a faint smell of diesel. But thermal scans detected residual heat beneath the platform remains, as if something large had recently moved below ground. Bernardi ordered a ground team. They dug beneath the cracked foundations of the San Pietro platform and hit metal, corrugated, rusted, but intact. An access hatch. Inside, a narrow staircase led to a subterranean passage lined with cables and defunct power panels. At the far end stood a small control room long abandoned. On one wall, a power console still hummed faintly, and above it, scrawled in fresh paint, were the words, "Train 904 has not yet arrived." When forensic light swept across the floor, they revealed footprints, one large, one small. Both recent. The smaller matched Amelia's shoe size exactly. The larger was consistent with Esposito's build. The prints led to the rear of the chamber, where a second hatch opened onto an older tunnel filled with stagnant water. At its center lay a rusted train carriage, half submerged. Its number barely visible. 904, inside. Investigators found scattered fragments of modern belongings. A digital camera battery, a scarf, a pair of sunglasses. And on the back wall, written in dust, she saw it. That discovery closed one loop and opened another. If Esposito had survived and rebuilt part of the system, what had Amelia actually captured? And why did the network's central system later register her arrival in Florence as if she had never disappeared at all? For Bernardi, the answer lay not in superstition, but in records. She ordered a full audit of the ticketing network, searching for duplicate validations tied to decommissioned stations. Within days, the system revealed 6 other anomalies, each matching the same pattern, all belonging to female passengers, all traveling alone, all tickets revalidated under stations erased decades earlier. The oldest case dated back 5 years. The newest was Amelia's. Whatever had happened inside that hidden line wasn't random. It was repetition, a ritual engineered through trains, time, and technology. Bernardi looked at the evidence board that night. The photographs, the maps, the handwritten words. Train 904 has not yet arrived. And she understood the meaning. The man who built this loop wasn't reliving the past. He was waiting for someone else to finish the journey. Amelia Voss had simply been the first to see what no one else dared to look for. By the time Inspector Lucia Bernardi walked into the command office on Via Zanardi, the walls were already drowning in evidence. Printouts of train routes, thermal scans, and photos of Amelia's last known moments covered every inch of corkboard. In the center, pinned with red thread, was the ticket. That impossible blue stamp, glowing faintly under ultraviolet. Bernardi stood still, eyes fixed on it. To her, it wasn't a symbol of mystery. It was a system failure, one that had swallowed a woman whole. The press called it the ghost line case. She called it an engineered illusion. But she also knew illusions required power, planning, and purpose. And those 3 things had human fingerprints. The investigation split into 2 fronts. The first, digital forensics, focused on the train's black box, ticketing systems, and Amelia's recovered devices. The second, Fieldwork scouring the physical remains of San Pietro delle Vigne for evidence of habitation or tampering. Both would lead to the same man, Leonardo Esposito, but by different routes. Lydia sat across from Bernardi during the first official briefing. She looked smaller than before, shoulders drawn in, eyes rimmed red. On the table between them lay a small leather pouch. Inside it, Amelia's memory card, her ticket, and a silver ring their father had given her years earlier. She wore that ring every day, Lydia said quietly. If she took it off, she wasn't planning to come back. Bernardi nodded, choosing her words carefully. We believe she met someone that night, someone who knew the system better than anyone alive. She slid across a photo, grainy surveillance stills from the Milan station, Amelia walking toward her platform. A shadow trailing her just out of frame, a man in a gray coat, Esposito, Lydia's. Lips tightened. He was supposed to be dead. Bernardi's tone didn't waver. Maybe that's exactly what he wanted us to believe. The technical team began their deep dive the following morning. Carlo Nicchi, the lead data analyst, sat in front of 6 monitors scrolling lines of code that mapped the railway's digital heart. Every ticket scan, every passenger manifest, every maintenance log lived inside those lines. He found the anomaly within hours. Amelia's ticket code wasn't unique. It appeared twice, once for her original purchase in Milan and once more posthumously from a ghost terminal ID, SPDV9B. That tag matched the long-deleted station code for San Pietro delle Vigne. It's not random, Carlo murmured. Someone reactivated the station's digital identity. Bernardi leaned closer. Could it be simulated? No, it's too specific. The timestamp aligns with the night she vanished, 01:14 a.m. The terminal's clock hasn't existed since 2004. He paused, hesitating, unless someone rebuilt it. Meanwhile, in the field, investigators returned to the underground chamber, where the rusted remains of train 904 lay submerged. Floodlights threw harsh white across the walls. Forensic teams collected samples: mud, decayed metal, traces of synthetic oil. But what drew Bernardi's attention was a faint hum underfoot, almost imperceptible. She crouched, pressed her ear to the cold concrete. It wasn't mechanical. It was rhythmic. Like an old generator, they traced the sound to a sealed vent. When pried open, it revealed a narrow conduit leading deeper underground, pipes, cables, all long disconnected. Except for one. A modern fiber optic line running through the old infrastructure. That's not railway equipment, one technician muttered. That's a data line. The conduit led 20 kilometers south, to a decommissioned freight depot outside Pistoia. Bernardi and her team arrived at dawn. Fog still clung to the hills, the air heavy with damp earth. The depot sat in silence, a skeleton of concrete and steel. Inside, old machinery lay draped in dust. And in the center, under a beam of morning light, stood a ticket validation terminal, powered and active. The screen flickered with blue text. Insert ticket. Carlo ran diagnostics remotely. The terminal wasn't connected to any modern network. Its power source ran off a generator buried beneath the floor, and its system logs showed 24 validations over the past decade, each bearing the same identifier, SPDV9B. The most recent? Amelia Voss, 01:14 a.m. Bernardi stared at the monitor. For the first time in years, she felt the thin line between logic and something else, something colder, more deliberate. He built this, she whispered. He built his own ghost line. The deeper they dug, the more the story began to fracture. Railway archives revealed that Esposito had been obsessed with redundancy, creating backup systems beneath existing tracks, mirrored databases that would survive power failures. He'd called it Echo Infrastructure. The project was canceled after the derailment that killed 12 of his colleagues, including his younger brother. After that, he vanished, but his code didn't. Carlo uncovered fragments of Esposito's digital blueprint stored within the National Rail Database, an encrypted folder never fully deleted. Inside were schematics labeled Linea Morta 904. It wasn't a map of trains. It was a simulation, a feedback loop recreating an eternal route between 2 stations, Milan and San Pietro. He designed a ghost timetable, Carlo said. Every few years, the system thinks one train still runs. He probably used it to manipulate real data. Bernardi frowned. And the passengers? He chose them manually. Travelers who matched his parameters, Solo, off-peak, predictable. He could intercept their data, reassign their ticket IDs, and make them appear inside his phantom line. She stared at the looping screen, the coordinates glowing faintly in blue. He wasn't killing people, she said slowly. He was making them vanish on paper first. But Amelia's case didn't fit the pattern. She wasn't meant to find him. She was meant to record light, not darkness. So why her? That answer came from a single recovered photo on her memory card. Forensic enhancement revealed a faint shape behind Esposito's figure, a rail sign half hidden in fog. Numbers etched into the metal, 090412L. Carlo cross-checked it against rail logs. It matched a maintenance unit assigned to Luciano Esposito, Leonardo's brother, the one who died in the 2004 collapse. In that moment, Bernardi understood. This wasn't revenge. It was resurrection. Leonardo Esposito had spent 20 years reconstructing the night his brother died, piece by piece, line by line, forcing the living world to acknowledge the one moment history erased. He'd built a digital echo chamber that captured travelers passing through it, rewriting them into his endless loop of grief. Amelia hadn't stumbled into his system by chance. She had been invited, the perfect witness, a photographer who chased light in forgotten places, someone who would understand the beauty of decay. He'd watched her work for months through her public posts, tracing her travel routes, anticipating when she'd take the Milan-Florence line, and when she did, he activated the loop. Bernardi ordered surveillance on every possible exit from the freight depot. But Esposito was already gone. The local caretaker reported seeing a gray-coated man 2 nights earlier, loading tools into a van. He'd said almost kindly, "The trains still run at night if you listen." The van's plates traced back to a rental paid in cash. The drop-off location, Florence. For days, Bernardi and Lydia worked side by side. They combed through Amelia's recovered photos, identifying landmarks and reflections. One image, when enhanced, revealed a distinct architectural feature, a Renaissance arch visible only at a handful of locations in Florence. It belonged to an old railway museum near Porta al Prado. When they arrived, the air smelled of oil and rust. A caretaker recognized Esposito's photo immediately. He came here 3 nights ago, said he used to work on the real thing. He had borrowed a ring of keys for a restoration project. The man never returned them. Inside the museum's lower hall, between restored locomotives, they found a black duffel bag. Inside, railway blueprints, an external hard drive, and a train conductor's cap. Embroidered with the initials LE back at headquarters, Carlo decrypted the hard drive. It held hours of surveillance, train carriages, tunnels, platforms, each time-stamped, each connected to the phantom linea morta. At the end of the footage, one video stood out. A fixed camera pointed toward the interior of a carriage identical to the one Amelia had boarded. The timestamp read 01:17 a.m. For 30 seconds, the frame was empty. Then a figure appeared. Amelia. She stood confused, looking toward the window. Behind her, a shadow moved. She turned suddenly, as if hearing something, and the footage cut. The final frame froze on her reflection, the faint imprint of the blue stamp glowing on the glass beside her. Bernardi's pulse quickened. "This isn't live video," Carlo whispered. "It's reconstruction data." He rebuilt her inside the loop. The footage had no physical camera. It was digitally rendered from motion sensors along track 9B, an artificial echo of Amelia's final minutes. Bernardi sat in silence. She felt the weight of it, the way obsession can bend reality until it forgets what's real. Esposito wasn't hiding in tunnels anymore. He was inside the network itself. His final file on the hard drive was labeled Arrival. When opened, it displayed one line of text, Florence. 0610, the light always returns. And below it, a single thumbnail image, a photo taken at dawn, showing the Florence station bathed in gold. Crowds blurred in motion, and there in the distance, Amelia, standing on the platform, smiling, but she was never seen there in person. No witnesses, no records. Just that one image burned into code. Bernardi looked at Lydia and said quietly, "He didn't kill her. He moved her." Lydia stared at the screen, trembling. "Moved her where?" Bernardi hesitated. "Between realities. Between lines of data. Between one timetable and another." It sounded impossible, but the evidence spoke in code, not blood. And in that code, Amelia Voss still existed, somewhere along the phantom route of Train 904. In the following days, Bernardi filed for a full network shutdown of the ghost infrastructure. Every line, every redundant connection. But before they could isolate the loop, one final validation appeared in the system. Ticket ID, AV time, 06:10 a.m. Location, Florence. Arrival. The terminal that issued it no longer existed. Bernardi closed her eyes. The story wasn't over. It had just changed form. She looked out the window at the real Florence station, sunlight spilling across the platforms. Commuters hurried past, unaware of the invisible network pulsing beneath their feet. Somewhere below, a signal light blinked once, then twice, as if a train was still passing through Florence at dawn. The city breathed in golden dust. Pigeons traced soft arcs over the cathedral's dome, and from the rooftops, the sound of morning bells rolled through the narrow streets. Down below, the station stirred awake, its stone platforms gleaming under the first light. And standing among the passengers, frozen in a digital photo that should not exist, was Amelia Voss. Her posture was relaxed, her face lit by sunrise. She looked alive but displaced, like a figure cut from one film and pasted into another. Inspector Lucia Bernardi stared at that image until her eyes blurred. "She's in Florence," Lydia whispered beside her. "She made it." "No," Bernardi replied softly. "Someone made it look that way. The photo wasn't captured by any known camera. Metadata showed impossible readings, 2 different timestamps fused together. One from the night of her disappearance. The other from 6 days later. Carlo, the data analyst, enlarged the photo. Each pixel was a map of contradiction. The reflection on the platform glass didn't match the light source. Shadows bent the wrong way, and within the crowd some figures repeated an echo, slightly distorted. "It's composite," he said, "but not by hand. It's generated through movement data." "You mean," Bernardi said, "the system itself created this?" "Yes. The same ghost network that validated her ticket." Bernardi returned to the freight depot outside Pistoia. The room still smelled of oil and damp concrete. The generator that powered the phantom ticket machine hummed low, steady, like a heart that refused to die. She switched it off. The silence that followed was almost reverent. And then she noticed it, etched into the machine's metal casing, barely visible under grime. Ecosystem reboot required every 72 hours. Esposito had built a loop that needed to be refreshed manually. Someone had to be maintaining it. That same night at exactly 1:14 a.m., the power flickered across the depot. Even disconnected, the screen lit faint blue. A single line of text appeared. "Passenger, AV, transit incomplete." Bernardi stepped back, pulse racing. For the first time, she considered the unthinkable. What if Amelia wasn't dead? What if she was in transit, trapped inside a feedback loop Esposito had built to preserve one single journey forever? The next morning, a breakthrough. Carlo decrypted the final layer of Esposito's files. Inside was a logbook of all network events linked to Linea Morta. Among hundreds of lines of code, one entry repeated, "Florence inbound signal active. Confirm receiver." He traced it to a disused railway museum storage annex, the same one where Esposito had left his duffel bag. Only this time thermal scans showed movement. Bernardi arrived before sunrise. The air was cold enough to bite. Inside the annex, cables coiled like veins along the floor, leading to a row of ancient relay computers humming softly. Each one flickered with identical screens. Arrival pending. At the center stood an old projector rig, its lens aimed at a white wall. A reel spun slowly, displaying a live image of an empty Florence platform. Then suddenly movement. A woman stepped into frame. Amelia. But the timestamp in the corner was wrong. April 18th, 2004. Bernardi froze. She whispered, "He rebuilt time." The voice that answered came from behind her. Low, measured, scarred. "I only rebuilt what they destroyed." Leonardo Esposito stepped into the light. Older now, face pale beneath years of isolation, eyes unblinking. The scar along his cheek looked deeper, the lines around his mouth rigid from years of obsession. He wore the gray coat from the footage and in his hand a rusted punch stamper. "You shouldn't have come," he said. "Where is she?" Bernardi demanded. Where she belongs. Between departures and arrivals. The place no one watches anymore. He walked toward the humming computers, his voice soft but sure. They buried us. 12 men, my brother among them, said we caused the derailment, but the fault was theirs, bad wiring, bad code. So I built my own network, a perfect one. No errors, no deaths, just continuation. Bernardi's hand hovered near her gun, but he didn't move to attack. He only gestured toward the glowing wall. She saw it. She documented what I made. That's why she stayed. The projection flickered again. Amelia's image turned, looking toward the camera. Her face calm, her eyes aware. She raised her hand as if to touch the lens. And behind her, the faint outline of another figure appeared. Male, wearing the same coat Esposito had on now. Two shadows overlapping across 20 years. She's not alive, Bernardi whispered. She's not dead either, Esposito replied. She's connected. Through the echo, Lydia, watching from the control monitor outside, shouted through the radio, "Lucia, pull back! He's rerouting power!" The lights flared white. A surge of current ripped through the relay boards. Sparks cascaded like fireflies. The projector's reel spun faster, the image blurring. Amelia's face dissolved into pixels, then reassembled frame by frame, older, younger, older again. Bernardi lunged toward the control switch and slammed it down. The screens went black. Silence fell. When her vision cleared, Esposito was gone. Police flooded the site minutes later. No trace of him. Only the lingering hum of cooling metal and the faint scent of ozone. But in the aftermath, one thing remained. A freshly stamped ticket resting on the console. The blue ink still wet. It read, AV, Florence arrival confirmed. The weeks that followed blurred. News outlets called it the ghost engineer revelation. Others simply called it madness. Yet the evidence didn't vanish. Every attempt to delete Esposito's system logs failed. Every backup copy regenerated. Every validation record reappeared under the same time, 06:10 a.m. The Phantom Network was still alive. Still running. Still looping. One afternoon, Bernardi met Lydia by the Arno River. They sat in silence, the city alive around them. Lydia clutched Amelia's ring between her fingers. "Do you think she's somewhere in there?" she asked quietly. "In that system of his?" "I think," Bernardi said. "He built a place that remembers her. That's not the same as being alive." "No," Bernardi agreed. "But it's not the same as being gone." The bells tolled 6. Light shimmered off the river. And from somewhere far beneath the city, faint and rhythmic, came the sound of rails. That evening, Bernardi returned to her office to close the file. As she typed the final report, a notification blinked on her screen. A new validation had appeared in the national ticketing system. Passenger ID AV Station Florence, time 06:10 a.m. But this time there was something new. Under operator, a name appeared, El Bernardi. Her breath caught. That's not possible. She tried deleting it. The record reappeared instantly. Same data, same time, then one more line appeared below. Echo received. Her office lights flickered. The monitor's reflection rippled across the glass window behind her. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw movement. A woman's face, faint and familiar. Eyes steady. Expression calm. Then gone, Bernardi sat motionless. Her pulse slowed. Outside, a distant train horn echoed through the night. Long, then short, then long again. "The signal for clearance granted," she whispered to herself. Train 904 has arrived. And in the silence that followed, the sound of rails began once more. The Florence station still hums each morning. Its platforms filled with the ordinary rhythm of life. Suitcases rolling, announcements echoing, pigeons lifting in sudden flurries. To most, it's just a terminal. But to Inspector Lucia Bernardi, it became a threshold. One she can never cross without hearing that ghostly horn beneath the noise of the city. After the incident at the annex, she had tried to move on. The report was filed. Esposito was declared missing, presumed dead. The network's phantom lines were wiped, its underground conduits sealed with concrete. But closure isn't an act. It's a haunting that takes its time. For Lydia, it came in quiet waves. She stayed in Florence, working part-time at a cafe near Santa Maria Novella. Every day she walked past the platforms, eyes scanning faces that would never match her sister's. She learned to live with the stillness of an unanswered question. But some mornings, Just as the sun rose through the glass roof, she'd hear the chime of an arrival she couldn't see. Maybe it's just the wind, she'd whisper, but she never truly believed that. Bernardi's life narrowed to files, silence, and sleepless nights. She found herself rereading the final line of the report more than she should have. Case closed. Digital interference unresolved. That phrase was bureaucratic shorthand for something deeper. We don't know. And we don't know doesn't rest. So 2 months after the investigation officially ended, she returned to the freight depot one last time. The air was thick with dust and ivy. Everything was silent except for the faint drip of water through cracks in the roof. She ran her hand across the cold metal of the disabled validation terminal. The display was dead, no power, no hum. But when her fingers brushed the surface, she felt static spark beneath her skin. A faint click. Then light. The screen flickered once, blue text bleeding through like ink. Echo operational. Bernardi exhaled, almost a laugh. You never stopped, did you? She took out Amelia's ticket, still sealed in evidence plastic. The blue ink was fading, but under the right angle of light it shimmered faintly like it still breathed. Something in her wanted to slide it into the slot. A simple impulse. A way to end it, she hesitated. Then did it. The terminal clicked. A low hum filled the air. Lines of text scrolled across the screen. Passenger recognized. Route 904, Florence. Transit complete. Then, as if drawn from memory, the projector beam on the far wall lit up. Static swirled. An image took form. The Florence station again. Morning light. A single train idling on the tracks. Passengers moving, blurred. And among them, Amelia. No longer just a photograph. Now she moved. She turned, smiled faintly as if she saw someone behind the camera. Her voice came through the static, soft, barely there. It's beautiful here. Bernardi froze. Amelia? I didn't mean to stay. The voice continued, echoing through distortion. But he showed me where it ends. Where what ends? The line. The one that never closes. The image shimmered. Behind Amelia, a man's silhouette appeared on the platform edge. Esposito. But his face wasn't cruel now. It was calm, almost peaceful. He raised his hand as if signaling farewell. Then the light consumed them both. The screen went dark. Bernardi stumbled back, heart hammering. The terminal's hum died completely this time. When she checked the evidence pouch, the ticket was gone. Only the faint impression of its stamp remained inside the plastic sleeve. She sank to the floor. For the first time since it began, she cried, not out of fear or relief, but recognition. Whatever Esposito had done, whatever Amelia had seen, it had ended here, inside a machine built to hold grief forever. 3 weeks later, an email arrived at her private address. No sender, no subject. Just an attachment. A single photo. It showed the Tuscan hills at sunrise. Golden light spilling over vineyards, mist curling through valleys. Amelia's style. Perfect framing, delicate balance, the signature color tone she always used. In the bottom corner, her watermark appeared faintly. AV 2025. Bernardi stared at it for a long time. Then she saved it to her desktop without opening the metadata. She didn't want to know if it came from the living world or somewhere else. Lydia received the same image the next day. No message. Just the photo. She printed it, framed it, and placed it above her bed. Sometimes she'd wake up before dawn, glance at it, and swear she could smell the warm air of Tuscany, the exact scent her sister once described. Sunrise tastes like dust and gold, Amelia had said once. Now Lydia believed her. The world eventually moved on. The case became a footnote in European transit law, cited in cybersecurity conferences as an example of network ghosts, digital anomalies that mimic life. The Florence station upgraded its systems, replaced its ticketing software, and repaved the tracks north of Modena. The tunnels at San Pietro della Vigne were sealed for good, but engineers still whispered that the sensors in that section sometimes blinked without cause. Once every few weeks at exactly 6:10 a.m., a phantom train ID appeared on their monitors. Train 904, arrival confirmed. And just as quickly, it vanished. 1 year later, on a warm spring morning, Bernardi rode the train to Florence again. She hadn't planned it. Her car had broken down. The train was convenient. But as the countryside rolled by, she found herself studying the rails, watching how they curved and split like veins across the land. When the train entered a long tunnel, her reflection caught in the window, and for a fleeting second another face appeared beside hers. Calm, familiar, smiling, Amelia. The lights flickered, and the image was gone. But on the glass, faint and temporary, a shape lingered, like the curve of a stamp pressed from inside the reflection. A blue spiral. That night, Bernardi filed no new report. Instead, she opened the email with the sunrise photo. This time she checked the metadata. The timestamp read 06:10 a.m., Florence. But the GPS coordinates didn't match any known location. They pointed to a point between two mapped rails, an impossible space suspended in transit. She closed the laptop and whispered, "Stay where it's beautiful." Months passed. Seasons shifted. Tourists filled Tuscany again, oblivious to the ghosts that once rode their lines. But among locals, a story began to spread. They said sometimes when the dawn train passes through the valley south of Florence, a faint light flickers inside the last carriage. A woman with a camera sits by the window filming the hills. When conductors approach, she smiles, nods politely, and vanishes at the next curve. No one ever finds a trace. Only a single paper ticket left on the seat. Its edges soft, its ink blue, stamped with a date that shouldn't exist. In the end, the investigation left behind two truths. One belonged to the world of evidence, a vanished tourist, a rogue engineer, a network glitch turned human tragedy. The other lived in the space between tracks, where echoes linger longer than bodies, and memories loop like circuits waiting to be heard. Amelia Voss never returned. But every morning, somewhere between Modena and Florence, the network still records a single validation. Passenger AV Route 904, Florence, arrival confirmed. Bernardi wakes early these days. She listens for trains in the distance. Each horn sounds like a heartbeat. Each departure feels like a beginning disguised as an ending. She keeps one photograph pinned above her desk, the Tuscan sunrise Amelia sent from nowhere. And under it, in her own handwriting, she's written 3 words, some lines never close. Then every morning at 6:10, her office lights flicker once. And somewhere in the unseen dark, a train glides onward.